Welcome in, and thank you for stopping by. Today we have a special video about a discussion about the first chapter of the Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. We will explore character actions and their beliefs and how they relate to us, the signs of the Cenobites and their meanings, and how desperation for pleasure can cause irreversible damage. A small little note before we begin. The Hellbound Heart is one of my favorite books, and if you love horror, I would highly recommend picking up this book. Today we're just going to be discussing the first chapter, and there's definitely more to read, so don't feel like you don't have to read it no more, because there is so much more into the story, and so much more motifs and metaphors and ideas that are worth discussion and are worth exploring. But either way, let's get into the discussion. To start off, Frank Cotton is someone who has done it all in the areas of sensual sensation, and having felt all earthly embraces, is now left with a great desire to feel something more, something that would bring him to the higher reaches of pleasure. And he seeked out a puzzle box that promises just that, but as we will discuss, possesses a barrier of entry only designed to let past the most deprived individuals through. Within the text, the author states, the doorway was even now opening to pleasures, which would redefine the parameters of sensation, which would release him from the dull round of desire, seduction, and disappointment that had dogged him from late adolescence. Frank had achieved a level of lustfulness that plateaued to a state where it didn't matter how many women he slept with, he wouldn't feel anything good, or anything at all. One can say many people find themselves in these situations, but instead of lustfulness, it is the pleasures of, but not limited to, success, money, materialistic things, or drugs. To make an example, an addict's first high was probably filled with bliss and goosebumps that tingled the brain, a moment so impactful they wished to achieve it again, but like Frank, only got drunk with disappointment. Before Frank's employment to summon the Cenobites, he's given a group of strange recommendations that would nurture their good offices. In the text, Frank is told to make an altar and have on hand bones, bonbons, needles, a jug of his urine, and a plate of dove heads. The bizarre and gross offerings can only hint at the wretched nature of the wonders inside the box, and that imagery of sweetness and death intertwined, a foreshadowing of the sorts of pleasures that the theologians provide. To add on, it can also be used as evidence of Frank's pure determination and desperation to acquire this pleasure. In the book, the author writes, he had anticipated this moment so keenly, he had left no part of the invocation ritual unobserved. We as the reader can say that Frank understands and acknowledges these bizarre offerings, but doesn't care about its deeper meaning, because Frank is more focused on making the Cenobites happy, so that they could provide him with the best they have, like a blacksmith giving the king their best sword, so to increase the chances of him receiving a good coin. By setting up this bizarre altar, Frank had defiled his character, and his desperation may have made him ignorant of the natures of the Cenobites. Within the story, Lemarchand's box is described as being incredibly difficult to solve. Only after many hours of dedication does Frank unlock a single section of the puzzle. If there was a system to the puzzle, Frank had failed to find it. Only after several hours of trial and error did a chance juxtaposition of thumbs, middle, and last bear fruit. An almost imperceivable click. And then, victory! A segment of the box slid out from beside its neighbors. To many, the simple difficulty of the box acts like a deterrent to the many who wish to unveil the box's wonders, but fail to have that pure determination and desperation to achieve it. Like the previously discussed example, the junkie will act upon all possibilities that would have the chance of acquiring that so sought after pleasure. We can only infer the amount of discomfort and numbness of Frank's legs and fingers and bones from hours of searching for an entrance with no door, aiding the belief that Frank is desperate. Ere opening the box, an interesting event happens. A great bell is described to play outside from where Frank sits. At some point in his labors, the bell had begun to ring steady, somber tolling. He looked up from his work. For a few moments he supposed the noise to be coming from somewhere in the street outside, but he rapidly dismissed that notion. There was no church in the city, however desperate for adherents, that would ring a summoning bell at such an hour. No, the sound was coming from somewhere much more distant. What makes this discovery important and noteworthy is that the ringing acts similar to the bells of a church. It notifies the beginning of Mass and calls in the good people of God to engage closely to the spiritual world. As in Frank's case, the bell notifies him of the close arrival of the Order of the Gash and its Cenobites. The inclusion that no church had no reason to ring their bell could be a metaphorical sign that the good God of the church is not here, and wherever Frank is a place without God. Clive Barker had said that the Bible was a great inspiration to his work, and here we can see that notion, where the motifs of Mass are twisted in a way to tell us, the reader, whatever has been started isn't an angelic thing, but a demonic thing. If one was to imagine how explorers of pleasure and its higher reaches would look like, one would imagine they would be beautiful, or maybe they brought with them signs of numberless splendors they had access to. But when they arrived, the Cenobites, they brought with them no signs of splendors, simply an aesthetic of death and pain. In the book, the Cenobites are described as having their flesh cosmetically punctured and sliced and infibulated, then dusted down with ash, and having the smell of vanilla, which did little to disguise the stench beneath. These descriptions tell Frank and the reader of the exactness of what the Cenobites are. A group of sadomasochists, infatuated with the rot of death. Contrary to being called studiers of pleasure and excitement, they don't look or behave in such ways. And this can be a representation of what these reaches would look like, becoming a different and more dangerous version of overindulgence, something only applicable to the most deprived individuals. To expand on this, one of the Cenobites that Frank confronts is described as such. The woman beneath was grey yet gleaming, her lips bloody, her legs parted so that the elaborate scarifications of her pubis was displayed. She sat on a pile of rotting human heads and smiled in welcome. The motifs of lustfulness are there, but because this is a form beyond his dull understanding, it appears to him a horrific collision of death and sensuality. Like Frank and many others, acquiring such high reaches of pleasure are rewarded with not more pleasure, but wretchedness and fear. Summarizing the discussion, Frank grew numb from the earthly delights of lust, so he sought out the ones who would provide him with the sensations. But his own hubris found him pain beyond his human understanding. A warning to all that overindulgence and desperation can lead to one's own downfall and suffering, that one must look at the offerings of the ones they summon, and think critically and act in the best interest of one's own sanity and health. And that was a quick discussion about the first chapter of The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. I hope I made the discussion make sense. I hope that you got something out of it, And if you really like this, let me know. Comment down what you think. What do you think these things mean? I want a discussion. And if you like the video, check out my other videos, my other discussions, and let me know how those go. But either way, thank you for sticking around, and stay safe.